Chloe stood in the bedroom, meticulously applying eyeliner in the mirror. Her reflection gleamed with confidence, but to Jack, seated on the bed behind her, something about the way she fussed over her appearance tonight felt different. Chloe had always been a stylish woman, her job as a marketing manager often requiring her to present herself impeccably. But this outfit wasn't just polished, it was provocative. The plunging neckline of her sequined black dress clung tightly to her slender frame, and her heels, higher than anything Jack had seen her wear in years, added an air of deliberate seduction. Chloe wasn't going to an office mixer, that was clear. But when Jack had casually asked about her plans, she responded breezily, "Oh, just a little party with some colleagues." Her tone was dismissive, even nonchalant, as though there was nothing unusual about it. Jack's stomach knotted. He glanced at the bedside clock. It was 7:45 p.m., later than Chloe typically stayed out for work events. He tried to shake the unease gnawing at him. "You've never mentioned this party before," he said carefully, keeping his tone light. Chloe met his gaze in the mirror, her eyes momentarily flickering with something unreadable. "It's no big deal," she said, turning back to adjust the silver necklace glinting at her collarbone. "It's just a small thing. Networking, you know." Jack forced a smile. "You're sure you'll be okay? It's late, and that dress seems—" He hesitated, not wanting to come off as controlling, but Chloe filled in the blank herself. "Too much," she quipped, smirking as she slipped on her heels. "Relax, Jack. You're acting like I've never been to a party before." Jack's mouth went dry. He watched her grab her clutch and head for the door without another word, leaving him alone in the bedroom. The sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor echoed, punctuated by the door shutting with a finality that set his nerves on edge. An hour later, Jack sat at his desk, staring blankly at his laptop screen. His work as a software engineer often required deep focus, but tonight his mind kept drifting to Chloe. Something about her demeanor gnawed at him. There had been a certain coyness in her tone, an unfamiliar edge to her confidence. His gut told him she wasn't telling him everything. He decided to check his phone. No texts from her. Nothing unusual. But the lack of contact felt more like silence than normalcy. Against his better judgment, Jack opened the Find My Phone app. They had shared locations for years out of convenience, though they rarely used it. He hesitated for a moment before tapping on Chloe's name. Her that was stationary, but it wasn't at a colleague's home or a familiar restaurant. It was across town, in a neighborhood Jack didn't recognize. A quick Google search revealed the address to be a trendy, upscale nightclub. Jack's pulse quickened. Networking? In a club like that? He closed the laptop abruptly, pacing the living room. His mind raced, trying to rationalize her behavior. Maybe it was a last-minute venue change. Maybe she hadn't wanted to explain the complexity of the event. But why wouldn't she just tell him? Why lie, or at least omit the truth? The sound of his thoughts was interrupted by a ping on his phone. It was a photo notification from Chloe's Instagram story. Opening it, Jack saw a selfie of her and another woman he vaguely recognized as one of her coworkers. They were standing under neon lights, cocktails in hand, with the caption, "Girls' Night Out." Jack frowned. Girls' night? That wasn't what she had said. By midnight, Jack's unease had solidified into a cold pit of suspicion. Chloe wasn't answering his texts or calls. He debated whether to go to the nightclub himself but worried about overreacting. Instead, he resolved to wait up for her. It wasn't until nearly 2 a.m. that he heard her key in the lock. Jack feigned nonchalance, sitting on the couch with the TV on, though he hadn't been watching it. Chloe entered, her laughter echoing as she stumbled slightly, heels in hand. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair, once immaculately styled, now looked tousled. "Hey," she said, her voice loud in the quiet room. "You're still up?" Jack studied her, his heart pounding. "Yeah. Just couldn't sleep." She dropped onto the couch beside him, her perfume overwhelming. "What's wrong? You look tense." "You never mentioned it was a girls' night," he said evenly. Chloe blinked, her smile faltering for just a second before she laughed. "Oh, come on, Jack. It was spontaneous. I didn't think it was a big deal." "Spontaneous enough to forget to answer my calls?" Her smile faded completely. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone sharp now. Jack held her gaze. I checked where you were. That didn't seem like networking. Chloe's eyes widened, a flash of anger crossing her face. You tracked me? Are you serious, Jack? I wouldn't have if you'd just been honest with me, he shot back. Why didn't you tell me it was a club? Chloe stood abruptly, her expression a mix of indignation and guilt. Because I knew you'd react like this. Always so paranoid, always questioning. Because something doesn't add up? Jack interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. You've been distant for weeks, and tonight, you just casually waltz out in a dress I've never seen before, going somewhere you don't normally go, and I'm supposed to just accept that? For a moment, Chloe said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, she grabbed her clutch and stormed toward the bedroom. I can't deal with this right now, Jack. You're being ridiculous. Jack sat back, his chest heaving. But as Chloe's door slammed shut behind her, he realized this wasn't just about tonight. Something had changed between them, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know what it was. Jack awoke early the next morning, a pit of unease still lodged firmly in his stomach. Chloe's indignant anger from the night before rang in his ears, but it wasn't her words that kept him awake, it was her behavior. Something was undeniably wrong. He sat at the kitchen table, the untouched cup of coffee in front of him growing cold. The house was silent. Chloe was still in the bedroom, likely nursing a hangover. Jack's mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. His instincts screamed at him to dig deeper, even as his heart clung desperately to the hope that he was mistaken. Picking up his phone, he opened their shared phone account. It wasn't something he'd ever had a reason to check before, but the nagging suspicion that had plagued him all night drove him to cross this line. The screen loaded, and Jack quickly navigated to the call and text history. His eyes scanned the familiar entries, his number, her parents, work contacts, but then something caught his attention. A number he didn't recognize appeared repeatedly, often late at night or during the hours he was busy with work. Dozens of calls, some lasting mere seconds, others stretching over an hour. The texts associated with the number were far more frequent, each timestamping moments where Chloe had told him she was working late or out with friends. Jack's stomach churned. The number was listed too many times to dismiss as a work colleague or casual acquaintance. His breathing quickened as he scrolled further, noting patterns that confirmed his growing fears. The calls spiked during the past month, aligning perfectly with Chloe's increasing aloofness. The texts were relentless, one after another, filling entire evenings while Jack had assumed she was upstairs reading or watching TV. His hand trembled as he copied the number and pasted it into a reverse lookup site. After a moment, the results came back, unlisted. Jack clenched his jaw. The lack of an immediate answer only fueled his anxiety. He considered confronting Chloe outright but hesitated. If she was lying to him, and the evidence now pointed squarely to that, she'd only deny it or find a way to justify her actions. Jack needed more than just a number, he needed undeniable proof. Over the next few days, Jack became a man possessed. He monitored the phone records obsessively, noting every interaction with the unknown number. Each discovery tightened the noose of his suspicions. Chloe continued to act as if nothing was amiss, though her behavior remained distant. Her phone was always within reach, her screen tilted away whenever she used it. The secrecy grated on him like nails on a chalkboard. One evening, Jack decided to push her buttons. As they sat on the couch, he casually asked, "Who've you been texting so much lately?" Chloe barely looked up from her phone. "Just work stuff. You know how demanding it gets?" Jack pressed on, keeping his tone light. "Work stuff at 11 p.m.? Sounds intense." This time, Chloe's gaze snapped to his, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you getting at?" "Nothing," Jack replied quickly, feigning nonchalance. "Just curious." Her lips tightened, and she stood abruptly, muttering something about needing a shower. Jack watched her leave, a bitter cocktail of anger and humiliation simmering inside him. He knew he was onto something, but her continued denial felt like a slap in the face. Unable to endure the growing tension, Jack decided to dig deeper. Late one night, after Chloe had fallen asleep, he tiptoed into their bedroom and carefully retrieved her phone from the nightstand. His heart pounded as he unlocked it using the password he'd seen her type countless times. The first thing he noticed was that her messages with the unknown number were gone. Every conversation had been meticulously deleted. Jack's heart sank. Chloe wasn't just hiding something, she was covering her tracks. Switching tactics, Jack opened her gallery. His pulse quickened as he scrolled through countless photos, selfies, work events, pictures of their dog, until he stumbled upon a folder marked with a simple emoji. He hesitated before opening it, his gut screaming at him to stop, but his hand moved almost automatically. The folder contained pictures of Chloe at the club from the night she'd gone out, pictures he hadn't seen on her Instagram. In one, she posed with her coworker, grinning brightly. But as he scrolled further, the images became more damning. One photo showed her with a man he didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, with a cocky smirk that made Jack's blood boil. In the next, the man's hand rested casually on Chloe's lower back. Too familiar, too intimate. Jack's vision blurred with rage. The last photo in the folder sent his world crashing down. It was a selfie taken in what appeared to be a dimly lit hotel room. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, her dress slightly rumpled, the same dark-haired man standing shirtless in the background, his face partially turned toward the camera. Jack's breath hitched. There was no denying it now. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a coincidence. Chloe was cheating on him. When Chloe woke up the next morning, she found Jack sitting at the kitchen table, her phone placed conspicuously in front of him. His face was a mask of fury and heartbreak. Care to explain these? Jack's voice was low, dangerously calm as he slid the phone toward her. Chloe's eyes darted to the screen. The blood drained from her face as she realized what he'd found. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I trusted you, Jack continued, his voice shaking. I ignored every red flag, every gut feeling, because I wanted to believe in you. But you've been lying to my face. Who is he? Chloe's lips quivered, but she said nothing. The silence was deafening. Who is he? Jack bellowed, slamming his hand on the table. Chloe flinched, tears pooling in her eyes. It's not what you think, she finally stammered. He's just someone I've been talking to. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? Jack cut her off, his voice thick with sarcasm. So those pictures were nothing? The texts, the calls, just casual conversation, huh? Chloe broke down, burying her face in her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jack. I was lonely. You're always working and I needed someone to make me feel alive again. Jack stared at her, the weight of her confession crashing down on him. His chest ached, not just from the betrayal but from the humiliation of realizing how blind he'd been. Chloe's tears did nothing to soften his rage. You've humiliated me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You've made me into a fool in my own home. Chloe sobbed harder, but Jack couldn't bring himself to comfort her. Instead, he stood, his voice steady but cold. You want to feel alive? Congratulations. You've killed everything between us. And with that, he walked out the door, leaving Chloe alone with the wreckage of their marriage. The front door creaked open early the next morning, and Chloe stepped inside. Jack was already in the kitchen, seated at the table with his arms crossed, staring blankly at a cold mug of coffee in front of him. He hadn't slept, the dark circles under his eyes a testament to the hellish night he'd endured. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Chloe didn't say a word as she kicked off her heels, her makeup smeared, and hair disheveled from what was clearly a sleepless night of her own. She avoided Jack's piercing gaze as she made her way to the counter to pour herself a glass of water. Where were you? Jack's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it once carried when he spoke to her. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Chloe sighed, leaning against the counter as she sipped her water. Do we really have to do this now? She asked, her tone exasperated, as though she were the one who had been wronged. Jack's jaw tightened. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Yes, Chloe. We have to do this now. You owe me an explanation, something you've been withholding for months. So go ahead. Tell me about Ryan. Chloe froze, her glass hovering midair. Her eyes darted toward Jack, but there was no shock in her expression. Instead, she lowered the glass, placed it carefully on the counter, and folded her arms. "Fine," she said evenly, her voice carrying a note of defiance. "You want to know about Ryan? He's a photographer I met at a work event. We've been seeing each other for a few months." Jack staggered backward, as though her words had physically struck him. He had prepared himself for this, but hearing it aloud, the confirmation of her betrayal, still felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "And that's it? That's all you have to say?" he asked, his voice cracking. "After everything we've been through, everything we've built together, you just casually admit you've been seeing someone else?" Chloe shrugged, her indifference like salt in an open wound. "I don't see the point in lying anymore. You already know, don't you?" Jack's hands balled into fists at his sides. "You're not even sorry," he spat, his voice rising. "You're not even pretending to regret it." Chloe tilted her head, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Why should I be? I wasn't happy, Jack. You're so consumed with work, so wrapped up in your little routines, you barely even notice me anymore." Ryan noticed. Ryan made me feel wanted, alive. Jack stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process her words. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? While I was here, working to provide for us, you were out playing dress-up and sneaking around with some guy behind my back." Chloe laughed bitterly. "Humiliating for you? Do you have any idea how suffocating it is to be married to someone who treats life like a checklist? Work, eat, sleep, repeat. That's you, Jack. I needed more than that. I deserve more." "More?" Jack shot back, his voice shaking with rage. "So your solution was to crawl into bed with another man? To lie to me, to betray me, and then stand here as if you're proud of it?" Chloe crossed her arms tighter, her posture defiant. "You never asked what I needed, Jack. You were content to just assume everything was fine. Ryan listened to me. He saw me for who I really am, not just the version of me that fits into your perfect little world." Jack's voice broke as he slammed his hand on the table, rattling the coffee mug. "We could have worked on it, Chloe. You could have told me you were unhappy. But instead, you chose to tear everything apart." Chloe rolled her eyes, her nonchalance cutting deeper than any insult. "I didn't want to work on it, Jack. I wanted out. And Ryan gave me that." Jack's hands shook as he paced the room, his mind a whirlwind of anger, humiliation, and heartbreak. "You disgust me," he said finally, his voice low but seething. "I gave you everything, and you threw it all away for a fling." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "A fling? Is that what you think this is?" She stepped closer, her voice dripping with mockery. "Ryan isn't some random guy, Jack. He's better than you in every way. He's passionate, spontaneous, exciting, everything you're not." Jack recoiled as if she'd slapped him. He felt the walls of his carefully constructed life crumbling around him. "And what about us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What about our marriage, our vows? Did they mean nothing to you?" Chloe's eyes hardened. "They meant something once. But people change, Jack. I changed. And I don't regret it. Not for a second." Her words hung in the air, suffocating him. Jack wanted to scream, to lash out, but all he could feel was a hollow ache in his chest. He stared at her, the woman he had once loved so deeply, and realized she was a stranger now. "Why are you even here?" he asked finally, his voice devoid of emotion. "Why come back at all if you're so done with me?" Chloe hesitated for the first time, her bravado faltering slightly. "I needed to pack some things," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the bedroom. "I didn't want to leave without clearing the air." Jack barked a humorless laugh. "Clearing the air? You think this makes things better? You think this makes you less of a liar, less of a cheater?" Chloe's jaw tightened, her defiance returning. "Think whatever you want, Jack. I'm done justifying myself to you. Ryan accepts me for who I am. That's all that matters." "Get out," Jack said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Take whatever you need and get the hell out of my house." Chloe didn't argue. She turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving Jack standing alone in the kitchen, his body trembling with the weight of her betrayal. As he listened to the sounds of her packing, each thud of a suitcase and zip of a bag felt like a nail in the coffin of their marriage. When Chloe finally emerged, her bags in tow, she paused briefly at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, her tone softer now, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jack. But I won't apologize for doing what I needed to do." Jack didn't respond. He couldn't. He simply stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. Chloe left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. Jack collapsed into the chair, his head in his hands, as the weight of her words settled over him like a suffocating blanket. She hadn't just betrayed him, she'd humiliated him, shattered his trust, and walked away without a shred of remorse. The silence after Chloe left was deafening. Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the door she had walked out of only moments ago. His mind replayed her words, every casual admission, every cutting remark, every justification for her betrayal. The woman he had spent years building a life with, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, had revealed herself as someone he didn't recognize at all. Jack's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. The images from her secret folder burned in his memory, searing reminders of her betrayal. He opened his contacts and found the number of a divorce attorney he had saved days earlier, back when his suspicions first began to take shape. At the time, it had felt like a betrayal of his own to even consider such a step, but now, it was the only path forward. He hesitated for only a moment before pressing the call button. The line rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered, "Law Offices of Miller and Grant. How can I assist you?" I need to speak to someone about filing for divorce," Jack said, his voice steadier than he expected. The receptionist transferred him to an attorney, and within minutes, Jack was recounting the events of the past few days. The attorney's questions were precise, cutting through the fog of Jack's emotions and focusing on the practical steps required to untangle his life from Chloe's. First, the attorney said, "You'll need to gather any evidence you have of her infidelity. Photos, text messages, call logs, anything that supports your claim." Jack's stomach churned as he thought about the humiliating trove of evidence already stored in his phone. "I have plenty of that," he replied bitterly. "Good," the attorney continued. "Next, we'll need to address the house. Are both of your names on the deed?" Jack shook his head, even though the attorney couldn't see him. "No, it's just mine. I bought it before we got married." "That simplifies things," the attorney said. "You can legally ask her to leave, but I recommend doing so in writing to avoid any disputes." By the time the call ended, Jack felt a grim determination settling over him. This wasn't just about ending his marriage, it was about reclaiming his life, piece by piece, from the wreckage Chloe had left behind. When Chloe returned later that evening, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor filled Jack with an immediate sense of dread. He was in the living room, a pile of their wedding photos spread across the coffee table. Each picture felt like a mockery, a lie frozen in time. Chloe breezed in, her expression neutral. "I forgot a few things," she said, as if she hadn't just shattered his world hours earlier. She moved toward the bedroom without waiting for a response. "Wait," Jack called out, his voice firm. Chloe paused, turning to face him. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked to the wedding photos on the table, her expression unreadable. "What now, Jack?" "This isn't your home anymore," he said, standing to face her. "I want you out, for good." Chloe raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," Jack snapped. "Stay with your boyfriend, stay in a hotel, stay on the street for all I care. But you're not staying here." Chloe's smirk faltered, replaced by a glimmer of irritation. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" Jack's voice rose, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You cheated on me, Chloe. You lied to me, humiliated me, and now you expect me to let you stay here like nothing happened?" Chloe crossed her arms, her posture defiant. "I have just as much right to be here as you do." "No, you don't," Jack shot back. "The house is in my name. I've already spoken to an attorney. Legally I can, and will, have you removed if you don't leave willingly." Chloe's face darkened, and for the first time, a hint of vulnerability crept into her voice. "Jack, be reasonable. I need time to figure things out." "You had plenty of time to figure things out," Jack said coldly. While you were sneaking around with Ryan, I was here, thinking we still had a marriage worth saving. But now I see the truth, you checked out a long time ago. So pack your things and get out." For a moment, Chloe looked like she might argue further, but then she straightened, her expression hardening. She said, "If that's what you want." "It's not what I want," Jack replied, his voice heavy with bitterness. "It's what you chose." The next few days were a blur of packing and paperwork. Chloe moved out in phases, her presence in the house growing smaller with each trip to retrieve her belongings. Jack refused to help, watching silently as she dismantled the life they had built together. Each box she carried out felt like a weight lifted off his chest, even as it left behind a painful void. As Chloe loaded the last of her things into her car, she turned to face Jack one final time. "You're going to regret this," she said, her tone icy. "You think you're better off without me, but you're not." Jack met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "The only thing I regret is trusting you." Chloe's eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing. She climbed into her car and drove away, leaving Jack standing alone in the driveway. In the weeks that followed, Jack threw himself into the divorce process with single-minded determination. He changed the locks on the house, removed Chloe's name from their joint accounts, and began the painstaking task of erasing her presence from his life. He deleted their photos from his phone, boxed up her remaining possessions, and donated anything that reminded him of her. The humiliation of her betrayal still stung, but Jack channeled his pain into rebuilding himself. He started working out again, pouring his energy into projects he had neglected during the marriage. Slowly but surely, he began to rediscover the man he had been before Chloe's lies had unraveled his world. But the scars of her betrayal lingered. Nights were the hardest, when the house was too quiet and his thoughts turned inward. He replayed her words in his mind, the way she had dismissed him so casually, the way she had shown no remorse. It wasn't just the infidelity that hurt, it was the way she had stripped him of his dignity, making him feel small and insignificant. Despite the pain, Jack remained resolute. Chloe's actions had broken him, but they had also given him clarity. He deserved better, someone who valued him, respected him, and didn't see their relationship as disposable. And while the road ahead was uncertain, Jack knew one thing for sure: he would never let anyone treat him the way Chloe had again. Jack sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence pressing in on him like a weight. Chloe's departure had left behind more than just physical space. It had left a void in his heart, one that echoed with her betrayal. The humiliation of it all still burned. The lies, the photos, the utter lack of remorse. He had given her everything, and she had turned it into a mockery. He rubbed his temples, trying to push the memories away. That's when his phone buzzed. Picking it up, he saw a message from Mike, his best friend since college. "Mike, you've been in your head long enough, man. Come to the gym today. We're not taking no for an answer." Jack sighed. Mike had been relentless ever since the fallout with Chloe. A gym trainer by profession and a no-nonsense kind of guy, Mike had made it his mission to drag Jack out of his misery. Jack appreciated the effort, even if he wasn't always in the mood for Mike's brand of tough love. "Jack, not sure I'm up for it today." Almost immediately, Mike replied. "Mike, get up. Put your shoes on. I'm outside." Jack groaned and peeked through the window. Sure enough, Mike's car was parked in the driveway. He was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, looking as determined as ever. An hour later, Jack was standing in the middle of the gym, feeling out of place in his old sneakers and slightly too loose workout gear. The scent of sweat and the sound of weights clanking filled the air, but Jack's mind was still trapped in the fog of the past. "All right," Mike said, clapping his hands together. "Here's the deal. We're going to focus on the basics first, simple strength training. But this isn't just about lifting weights. This is about reminding yourself that you're strong. Stronger than you think." Jack rolled his eyes. "Don't get all motivational on me." Mike grinned. "You need it, trust me." The first few sets were brutal. Jack's body, unused to the strain, protested with every lift and every push. His muscles burned, sweat dripped into his eyes, and his arms felt like jelly. But Mike was relentless, standing by him, encouraging him with sharp commands and the occasional sarcastic jab. "Come on, Jack," Mike barked as Jack struggled to finish a bench press. "You're not going to let a guy named Ryan beat you, are you?" Jack couldn't help but laugh, though it came out more like a grunt. "I hate you." "You'll thank me later," Mike replied, smirking. Over the next few weeks, the gym became Jack's sanctuary. Every session was grueling, but it gave him something he hadn't felt in months: control. With each weight he lifted, with each step he ran on the treadmill, he felt the heaviness in his chest begin to lighten, bit by bit. Mike was always there, pushing him harder, keeping him focused, and occasionally dragging him out for a drink after a particularly rough day. One evening, as they sat at a small bar near the gym, Mike leaned back in his chair and studied Jack. "You're starting to look better, man," he said, taking a sip of his beer. Jack shrugged. "Still feel like crap most days?" "Yeah, but you're showing up. That's what matters. Showing up, putting in the work. The rest will come." Jack looked down at his drink, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It's just hard not to think about everything she said. Like I wasn't good enough. Like I was boring, predictable. What if she was right?" Mike's expression hardened. "Stop that. You're going to let Chloe, of all people, define who you are? She's the one who screwed up, not you." "But what if I pushed her away?" Jack said, his voice barely audible. "What if—" "Stop," Mike interrupted. "This isn't about her anymore. It's about you. She doesn't get to control your life, your thoughts, or your worth. You're Jack freaking Miller. You're a smart guy, a damn good friend, and if you keep at it, you'll be in the best shape of your life. Let her regret losing you, not the other way around." Jack smiled faintly. "You always this good at pep talks?" Mike grinned. "Comes with the job." With Mike's support, Jack began to focus on more than just his physical health. He started picking up old hobbies he'd abandoned during his marriage. His guitar, which had collected dust in the corner of his office, became his companion during quiet evenings. He rediscovered his love for hiking, spending weekends exploring trails and soaking in the peace of the outdoors. At work, Jack threw himself into new projects, earning praise from his colleagues and even a promotion. For the first time in months, he felt like he was moving forward, like he was becoming the person he had lost somewhere along the way. But the scars of Chloe's betrayal weren't so easily erased. Every now and then he would catch himself scrolling through old photos or rereading her texts, as if trying to piece together what went wrong. On particularly bad nights, he replayed her cold, mocking words in his mind, her smug smile as she dismissed their life together as predictable. One such night, after a restless evening staring at the ceiling, Jack texted Mike. "Jack, why does it still hurt so much?" A few minutes later, Mike replied. "Mike, because you cared. But don't let her make you think that was a weakness. It's a strength, man. The right person will see that one day." As the months passed, Jack began to notice the changes in himself. His reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the broken man Chloe had left behind. His body was stronger, leaner, his posture more confident. He smiled more often, laughed more easily. Even his coworkers commented on the difference, though they didn't know the full story behind it. One afternoon, as he packed up his things at the gym, Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Proud of you, man. You've come a long way." "Thanks," Jack said, meaning it. "I couldn't have done it without you." Mike shrugged. "That's what friends are for. But give yourself some credit. You put in the work." As Jack walked to his car, he realized Mike was right. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of pride, not just in what he had accomplished physically, but in his ability to survive the worst pain of his life and come out stronger on the other side. Chloe's betrayal had broken him, but it hadn't destroyed him. He was still standing, still fighting, still moving forward. And for now, that was enough.